Hi, Jason Rulo, Pinnacle Personal Performance Training. So today I'm going to talk about lactate energy system, anaerobic threshold, how it corresponds to training and heart rate, and kind of demystify it. There's a lot of people get caught up in the terminology, and do you use this, the lactate threshold, to use the term anaerobic threshold, what really are we talking about? And with that being the case, people get lost in the minutia and how it applies. So I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible for you to understand and to give you a better idea of how to apply this information to your training and not get worried, not get so lost in all the different terminologies. So basically, using my ultra fancy whiteboard here, I'm going to try to make some correlations between, or use some examples based on a Toyota Prius, how an electric car works, and also how preparation for a trip to Vegas and maybe an all-nighter bachelor party or something like that would correspond to training. And bear with me on that. So let me get some generalized terms out of the way, and just so you understand. Okay, if this chart represents me, I'm going to use my numbers because it's easiest to go off of real numbers. My resting heart rate's 47. Okay, my max heart rate's 187. If there is ways to guesstimate or to estimate what that would be, it's called the Corvonen formula, where it's 220 minus your age. But using that formula, it would only be 180, and I've actually tested it is 187. So I need to have this number as accurate as possible for the rest of these percentages to work. But at different levels of heart rate, I'm using different substrates for energy. Okay, aerobic system will basically work for me at a heart rate below 140. That's my MAF number. I've rounded these numbers a little bit to make it easier for people to understand. So my actual number is like 135. It doesn't matter. 140 is my aerobic capacity. Okay, go above 140, and basically I'm going to start burning sugar in order to make up the difference in my running pace. So this blue area here, that goes all the way across here, this blue area is my aerobic capacity. It's my base level, my aerobic base, as they say. This green area is all my anaerobic capacity, my ability to keep my engine going using sugar right up, actually all the way up to my max heart rate. But the real line for as far as racing and training is concerned is this red one, and that is what I would call my lactate threshold. It doesn't matter if you call it the lactate inflection point, you call it the lactate threshold. It's something, like I said, some people use this as the anaerobic threshold, this area that you start to pass out of your aerobic zone and into your anaerobic zone. They could call that lactate threshold, whatever. Whatever this point is, it's approximately 90% of heart rate max, no matter what you call it. 90% of heart rate max is going to be a point at which you're going to see a decrease in performance. Now, remember, no numbers are hard and fast. 90% is an estimation about where you're going to pass into that level 5 zone, as they say. And basically, you're not going to be able to sustain exercise very long past this red line. So this is the red line limit. That when you're racing, racers will say, "Oh, I'm redlining it." That's this right here. Okay. So the closer I get to this, the more my body's going to be affected by lactate and by the more specifically the hydrogen ions that are a byproduct of it. So just know that my MAF, my 180 minus my age, which comes out to about 140. Comes out to 140 is an approximation. That's about 75% of my heart rate max. That number varies as well. It could be down as low as 70, whatever. But just know that it's down around 70 to 75%, and that's going to get me basically my line, my quote-unquote anaerobic threshold, whatever. If I get above this line, I'm moving out of aerobic metabolism and having to start burning some sugar. This is pretty much infinite because you're running off of fat stores. This is finite. Okay, you will not be able to handle this depending on how close to this red line you are for more than a given amount of time. Okay, so if we look at it in terms of a car, electric car, Toyota Prius, and how that works, their synergy drive. This is my electric battery. Okay, it can go a long ways and it kind of recharges itself. Okay, but I can't drive I can't drive at high speed, and I cannot get on the highway with it. I mean, I can't pass people with it because it just doesn't have enough power. It's a low power motor. So in order to do that, I have to start enacting some of my gas motor. And that's this here. That is your anaerobic energy system. It allows you to pass. It allows you to maintain a higher speed than you normally would be able to. You know, you're trying to push it into 5K or whatnot. That is all this extra here. Anything above a certain speed. So let's say, for example purposes, my Toyota Prius here and its electric engine needs to go on the highway and get and exceed 55 miles an hour. We're going to say that this number here is 55 miles an hour. And we're also going to use the example that the Prius cannot exceed 55 miles an hour without assistance from the gas engine. Okay, so just as in your body, these things do not work completely independent of each other, the synergy drive system doesn't work completely independent either, but for our purposes here, we're going to say both of them do work independently. And as soon as I pass out of this realm, I now stack this on top of this. This doesn't stop working. The aerobic system is continuing to work. It just needs a little help. So that's where this comes in, my gas engine. Okay. So let's say that my 140 heart rate is an 8-minute mile, which is pretty close to probably what I'm going to run if I'm going to run just aerobic on a track for a mile. Okay. So this is an 8-minute mile capacity. If I want to run in a race, anything above that, I need help from my lactate energy system. I need help from my gas engine. Okay. This, let's just say, my maximum time trial capacity, the fastest I can run a time trial, I'm going to round it off. I'm going to say it's a 6-minute mile. Okay. So this capacity here is a 2-minute mile capacity. This is my base. This is 8. And this has a 2-minute additional capacity to get me down to a 6-minute mile and still stay under my red line. Okay. Hopefully you're following me on this. But this is a finite amount. This will only last me a certain amount of time, and the closer I get my heart rate to this red line, because it's probably going to start, I start out and I want to run a 6-minute mile, and I'm here, and this is gradually going to go up, 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 and eventually I'm going to hit that line, and when I hit that line, my pace is going to start to drop off. Now, this could be 3 miles, hopefully, if I'm running a 5K, but if it's not, and I haven't been training properly, and I'm trying to run a 5K, it might be back here, and now I'm going to start slowing down. Now that guy that I'm chasing is going to be able to outpace me. Now here's the difference. If this line for me is an 8-minute mile, but I'm racing someone who's an elite aerobic athlete, doing a lot of training, a lot of base training, this line for them might be a 7-minute mile. Now, in order for me to make up and just stay with them, I have to be up here in this area here, burning sugar, just to stay with him. So he's got a bigger battery. He's got a Tesla down here. He's got this massive battery that's able, or massive electric motor that's able to push him a minute mile faster than me, and he's still in the base. So if he's done any kind of lactate training, he's probably going to smoke me as soon as he decides to shift it in and get some help out of his gas engine, right? I hope that makes sense. So the idea is to have the biggest base, the biggest electric engine you possibly can, so that once you get up into this area, you're already moving at a fast pace. If you have a VO2 max of 68, you're in this range here, your range is pushed up a lot. Your ability to handle a certain workload, let's say that 6-minute mile, is a lot easier versus somebody who's got, let's say, a 54 on their VO2. Even though the heart rate might not correlate exactly, if they've only got a 54, 52, 54, excuse me, that's going to put you at a disadvantage because you've already got to be in this anaerobic area just to stay with them. Hope that's making sense. So what's this lactate tolerance thing? What's this different line up here? I got this, 85%, I got this line right here, and, what does that mean? If my quote-unquote threshold line is 90%, at 85%, which is about 158 or 160 if you want to round it off, between 160 and 170, I got this little area here. What is that? Well, that would be your lactate tolerance ability. So what are we talking about with that? So you have aerobic base training and you have lactate tolerance training. Okay, those are two important factors when you're talking about racing in general. So if we want to use an example of drinking alcohol, you go to a bar and you drink and you never go. You get drunk pretty easily, right? Part of it is because you're not used to being drunk. Part of it is your body doesn't know how to process the alcohol. Well, that would be this area here. Okay, if this area is if we're using beer as an example, this is my 2 beers. I can handle 3 to 4 beers an hour. This is my 2 beers. That one's easy. No problem there. Don't have to think about that. It's that extra beer, or maybe 2, that kind of put me in this area, this gray area. This is the tipsy area when you're talking about alcohol. This is the tipsy area, but this is the legal limit. This is the 0.08. If I reach this level, I'm legally drunk. I may not be stupid yet, but I'm legally drunk. If I go over this line, I go over it for too long, yep, it happens. Then I'm going to be in trouble. So the idea, if you're going to try to go make a marathon drinking binge, like a trip to Vegas, and you're going to try to go for 12 hours and drink the whole time and not get too hammered, well, you want to have the best tolerance, alcohol tolerance you can. So the idea would be, then, in preparation for your trip to Vegas, you go out to the bar 3 or 4 nights a week and you consistently drink 3 or 4 beers. And eventually, either this number, which it either gets pushed up or your ability to deal with this area here gets better. Either way, you're better able to stay close to this red line without falling off and without going way overboard. You got a pretty good idea also with all your practice about how many you can have and at what time frame. All that stuff plays a role because you spend a lot of time here in this tolerance area, in this 3, 4, maybe even building up to 5 beers in an hour and being able to handle that for multiple hours. So that's this, that you're spending time in that tolerance area. So if you spend time training in this tolerance area, your body gets used to that level of lactate, the level of hydrogen ions. It gets used to functioning up there. So whether or not you actually move this line to, 173, 174, maybe possibly 175, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the line moves. I actually race about 5 beats a minute higher than I can train at. Is that due to adrenaline? Is that due to some magical shift in capacity because now I'm pushing hard in a race and I can handle it? I don't know. It doesn't matter. All I know is that when I get into a race, my training 170 now becomes 175. Now, the longer I spend close to this line, the more trouble I'm going to have. So ideally, I would want to be close to the line, but not too close to it. So if in training it would be 160 to 170, let's say it goes up 5 beats a minute because that's my experience. 165 to 175 is my tolerance area for a race. I want to be averaging 170 just under that time so I can go, and still have a little bit of room in case I got to go up a hill and whatnot. So the longer I can spend in this area during training, the easier it'll be during racing. I hope this is making sense to you. Just know that if I'm trying to build in training my aerobic base, I need to be MAF. Maffetone, phylmaffetone, 140 for me. That is 180 minus your age. Stay below this line, I'm building aerobic base. If I'm training, me personally, between 160 and 170, I'm in my tolerance area. I'm building up my lactate tolerance. The more time I can spend here, whether it be with doing 800s or trying to run for 15 minutes in this threshold area, allowing it to recover a little bit, and then going back and trying to stay in that threshold again, the more time I spend in this tolerance area, the better my tolerance is going to be, just like with the alcohol, of this lactate. So when I get into a race, I'm going to be better able to handle that for the given time period. Okay, this area here, this is kind of the play zone. And for most racers, the racers who don't see a whole lot of results in their training, this is where they spend the bulk of their time. They run in this regularly. They don't ever spend much time running in aerobic base, and they don't spend a whole lot of time in running in this tolerance area because this, to be honest, sucks. So they spend in this semi-comfortable area running as fast as they think they can run in a semi-comfortable area. And this might be good for an endurance race like, 8 hours. But for speed training, for being able to run maximal speed, this isn't that effective. And for being able to build a big aerobic base, this doesn't really do much at all because you're in your anaerobic system. So remember, the people who oftentimes have the highest aerobic base are the people who live actively. everything they do is active. They're outside all the time. They're riding bikes. They're doing cross-country skiing. They're just active people. And all that time, above their resting of 110, 120, they're building this aerobic base. So for me, if I'm using the number 110 starts exercise, from 110 to 140, that 20 beat per minute thing, I'm building an aerobic base. But it may not even be in quote unquote training. Anything from 140 to 160, I'm in this semi-uncomfortable, semi-lactate threshold training area. But my real threshold training occurs when I get from 160 to 170 and I'm pushing pretty hard. I'm able to handle that so that when I get in a race, this 170 line isn't such of a difficult red line to handle. I hope all of this makes sense because that's the real key. If you want to use heart rate and correlate it to pacing, that's fine. You know, if this is my number and I say, okay, this is an 8-minute mile and my heart rate's at 140, that's great. This is 170 and a 1-minute mile time trial. This is 6-minute mile, and let's go halfway in between. Say 155 is my 7-minute mile pacing on flat, and kind of use those for pace charts. You can do that, but just know that these are what these numbers represent. The 140 is an estimation of where my aerobic capacity is, and before I pass my anaerobic threshold, as they say. And my 170 is my maximum ability to sustain performance. And understand this is a finite amount of time and a limited amount of time up here. But the amount of time I spend training in this threshold area will affect how long I can stay close to this 170 threshold. I hope this makes sense. Hope you guys understand. If you got questions, comments, please leave it below. Contact me, trainer at pinnaclepersonaltraining.com. I'm happy to answer any kind of questions you might have, but hope I shed some light on the subject.